Welcome to the Zealous Podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder. This week I've got Dan Mahoney in the house. He's the rehab pitching coach for the Cleveland Guardians. We're going to talk all about his work with the pitchers. But before we do, be sure to click that subscribe button if you haven't already. And follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder. And remember that Setanta College is the place to go for a master's program in science. Maybe it's performance coaching that you're interested in. Perhaps it's applied sports and biomechanics movement science. They've also got a program for sports injury and return to performance management, as well as applied sport and exercise psychology. Just go online to setantacollege.com, throw in the code RS10, RS10 for 10% off your tuition. And while you're online, go to the NSCA and cast your vote right now. Ballots are open for the board of directors, and you might recognize somebody there. On to the show. Well, Dan, welcome to Zealous. I'm stoked because you are actually, your position as rehab pitching coach is something that title or a position that I have yet to have on the podcast. So there's going to be a whole bunch of cool and new information, at least in my perspective, that I'm going to learn from you. So a very selfish kind of hour for me, I guess you'd say. But first, welcome to Zealous, and tell us a little bit where you are right now and how you got to be there.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I am currently in Phoenix, Arizona, as the rehab pitching coach for the Cleveland Guardians here at our spring training complex. How I got here, did a little work in the private sector after playing 4 years professionally. So yeah, that's how we got here to beautiful, hot Arizona.
Yes. So basically you have all your players show up around midnight and you work till 6 a.m. so that you can sleep during the hottest part of the day. Is that how that works?
That is incorrect. We are actually out there in the heat all day, which is great.
Dude. And but you grew up in the Northeast, so at least for a few weeks out of the year, you're no stranger to hot weather, although the humidity in the Northeast is a little bit greater than down in the desert there. You and I both grew up in the Boston area, and then you went off to school at UConn. I was just kind of, I guess I'd be northeast at UMass, and then, but that's where our stories kind of diverge here. What happened after UConn? Where'd you go?
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to be drafted by the Florida Marlins, and had the opportunity to go play professional baseball for about 4 years. About 2 months after I signed, had Tommy John surgery, which kind of led me on the path that I'm on today.
So I'm assuming you were a pitcher, but Tommy John surgery is not exclusive just to high volume throwers like pitchers. But is that correct? Were you a pitcher?
Yes, correct.
And your signature throw, what was your pitch?
Whatever one was working that day. Fastball, curveball, changeup were the three primary. So yeah.
And did you have a favorite looking back?
Throwing a fastball by someone really feels good.
Right on. And so within the Marlins organization, there's so many different teams. Did you go into the development league? Were you down into the DR? Like, where did you spend the majority of your time with the Marlins?
The majority of my time with the Marlins was actually spent in Jupiter, Florida. I did my whole rehab there, which took about 10 months to get back, which was really quick. From the time of surgery to back in games, which is something that we would not do now. But from there, got released and then was able to sign with the Yankees. So most of my professional career was spent down in Florida.
And you wouldn't do that now. Why is that? What's that all about?
Just a really short timeline for the injury. This was in 2009, so Tommy John surgery was kind of hitting its peak of guys getting it. Not that it slowed down at all, but just different protocols. I think we've learned a lot more about the surgery and the time it takes to heal and to get back to not only health but also performance.
Well, why don't we just dive into there? I'd love to talk about Tommy John surgery and the past and the present, and for that matter, where is it going into the future? But give me a little bit of rundown, if you don't mind, in terms of the rehab protocol from, say, 10 years ago to where it is today.
Yeah, so I think when I went through it, I was in a brace or in a cast for about 2 weeks. And then you move into your brace and slowly regain range of motion through the elbow. There's two ways that you can get it. You can take the graft from the gracilis, or you can take it from the forearm. I had it from the forearm, so I was lucky enough to not have to do two rehabs at once.
Right.
And then basically it's just regaining range of motion through the elbow. And then you then go back into lifting and physical activity. And then at about the 4 to 5 month mark, you start throwing. The throwing protocol just kind of takes about it's about 6 months or so right now. So you're looking at about 12 to 14 months versus back when I did it. Obviously, we expedited that a little bit and got back into games at about 10 months.
Wow. Okay. I'm imagining that they had tried at one point cadaver, using cadaver tendons or ligaments, but that's not the case. They just pull it from the athlete themselves, and there's no repercussions.
I mean, there obviously it's surgery. There's definitely repercussions on some things. I don't know the whole backstory of the surgery and if they did use cadavers or not. I just know that most guys are either getting it out of their forearm now, or they're getting it from their hamstring.
Oh, their throwing arm or non-throwing arm?
Typically, I believe it's a throwing arm. Like I got mine out of my throwing arm.
All right. And then just kind of curious, it seems to be successful, or was it successful?
Yep, yeah. According
Back in
to
10 months.
what was that?
It got you back to throwing in 10 months. That I would say it was pretty successful.
Yeah, yeah. Most guys have successful ones. There are other cases of revisions and guys having to get a second one. So for the most part, they are successful. I think there's a misconception about you come back throwing harder and that's a guarantee, which it's not. And I think there are some guys who come back definitely stronger, and then there's also guys who don't come back. Mine was successful from a health standpoint. I was able to pitch again in games and continue on with my career. It took a little bit of time to get back to peak performance, and so I think each case, just like any surgery, is case by case.
And I imagine you had yourself a rehab pitching coach, like the position that you're holding right now.
Yep. Yeah. Correct. The rehab pitching coach that I had was also the Gulf Coast League coach at the time, down in Jupiter, Florida.
And was he that influential on you that's just it? You just were like, okay, if my career doesn't pan out with the majors or through the minors, then I know what I want to do. Is that kind of what happened?
No. So my path kind of took me on more of a like strength conditioning. When I was done playing, I didn't want anything to do with the game. So I fully stepped away for about 4 years or so. Just really dove headfirst into strength conditioning. Was fortunate enough to come out of pro ball, move back to Massachusetts, and begin working at a PT clinic in Boston, which really gave me kind of a new lens as to working with general population, some younger athletes, and then also some professional athletes in more of a strength conditioning setting.
So like rehab strength conditioning or just pure strength conditioning because they didn't have any symptoms?
Both.
Oh, interesting. And so then I imagine you went with the NSCA certified strength conditioning specialist, all that route?
I did not. I never finished my degree at UConn. So I went through NASM I went through a bunch of different courses, self-study, really just like the personal trainer route. And then having the knowledge that I did from my playing days and also college, I just kind of blended that all together for, the athletes and the people at that time. I had some great people that tutored me, who had a lot of experience up at Boyles, kind of being in their backyard. So I had some great mentors along the way, and people that really just kind of showed me the ropes in that realm, which ultimately led me to blending both my passions and getting back into the game of baseball when I moved down to Virginia.
Nice. So did you work with Mike at his training facility for a while?
No, I didn't. I worked at Train Boston with Tim Brewster and his crew there. So yeah.
Right on. Okay, and then you opened up your own facility, and you've got a performance center right now. Where's that located? You've been doing that for about 5 years, you say?
Yep, it's in Ashburn, Virginia, up in Loudoun County. We opened right at the start of the pandemic, which was fun.
Congratulations. Your
Thank you.
timing. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. Really great time to dump a lot of money into a warehouse and have to be in close contact with people. But none of us could have foreseen that. So yeah, we actually, it probably helped us more than it hurt us. At the time that everything reopened down in Virginia, I think all of the parents in Virginia wanted their kids out of the house. So we actually got flooded, and we were able to expand twice since opening. And yeah, we're still running down there in Virginia right now.
Fantastic. Well, what size facility is it? How many square feet do you have?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, just because we've expanded, but we got 4 cages, full gym, full office, so probably around 5 to 6,000 square feet.
Wow. Fabulous.
Yep.
But like you say, I mean, adversity provides you with great experience. So opening at the start of the pandemic, I mean, for us, we had to do quite a few pivots here and there, but you figure out a way, and I think it makes you stronger. So speaking of making you stronger, that's what you're doing right now with a lot of pitching, a lot of pitchers. But what was the catalyst for saying, hey, I'm going to keep the facility here in Virginia, but I've got this opportunity to head to Phoenix? What happened there?
Yeah, so I've always been kind of driven to challenge myself, and just kind of continue to push and see how far I can take things. And so we work primarily with injured guys down in Virginia. We get a lot of clients who are coming off injury or have had injuries in the past, and they want to kind of figure out how to stay healthy and then return to performance. So having done that in the private sector really kind of pushed me to see if there was other opportunities within the game of baseball to see if I could do it at a higher level. And so I interviewed with the Boston Red Sox for the same position that I'm holding now with the Guardians. Didn't get the job, and that kind of lit the fire underneath me to say, hey, like, let's actually pursue this and see if I can do it and help the guys who are at the highest level come back from their injury and hopefully have a better experience than some guys do, and really try to push rehab and see if there's something better than just the piece of paper that was written in the 1970s with the first Tommy John, and see if we can get guys to detour versus derail their careers coming off injury.
So what are the big bucket items when it comes to rehabbing a pitcher? What are the things that, like, these are the top 3 that I need to really focus on with these athletes? Or is it individual based and it all depends on their overall body mechanics? How does it work?
Yeah, so I think it's a wide spectrum. I think it's more on the individualized base. Obviously, there's some check marks that we have to get through from the protocol, from an intensity standpoint of throwing, from a volume standpoint of throwing, and then also building them back up to a mound progression a lot of BP progression, and then, ultimately back into games. So I think each guy we try to look at individually. Do they need to repattern before we start throwing? Their arm action, how they're using their lower half and their mechanics. And then, some guys, they have clean mechanics and maybe just weren't ready for the workload that they were given. Injuries happen that way as well. So it's really on that spectrum. We try to look at each guy individually and really try to hone in on each guy's process, from the start.
And what's the length of the process for, say, Tommy John surgery? Seeing we're speaking of that.
Yeah. So right now we're at about 14 months back into games for most guys if everything goes smooth. Which, if anybody's worked in the rehab space, typically there's a hiccup along the way. Whether that be just some general soreness to where we have to kind of push things back, give deload weeks and stuff like that, or some guys have some really big issues that they just don't come back from as quickly as we'd hoped.
Got it. So, in terms of like, I won't say a success rate, but the guys that you see, is it, 2 out of 10 that just go sideways and don't work out, or what's this statistic, just kind of anecdotally with you?
Yeah, I mean, we've been lucky. We've had a lot of successful ones. I think that there's some guys who have struggled to come back. But for the most part, I'd say we're at about 90% of the guys coming back to full health at some point. Again, sometimes the rehab process is longer than others. But for the most part, they're getting back into games and into throwing about 90% of the time.
And I'm imagining, but I could be wrong, it's more than just Tommy John surgery. I mean, are there other issues, like other symptoms, shall we say, other injuries that you're dealing with, or is it just like, hey, send me all your Tommy Johns?
Yeah, no, we work with everything. So whether it's a lower body issue, whether it's a shoulder issue, forearm, back, like I've basically seen a little bit of everything during my year and a half with the Guardians so far.
So when it comes to Tommy John surgeries and the rehab, we can look at it as the symptom site being around the arm itself, the elbow, and so on. But it's connected all the way through the chain. And you already mentioned a little bit about looking at movement and the mechanics of their throw. But how deep do you go below the surface? Do you stick with just the upper extremity, or do you follow the rabbit down the hole and look at hip internal rotation and flexion? Do you look at varus valgus knee positions or foot ankle motion? How, when you're looking at how do you rehab this player? Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yep. Yeah, it's a full team effort. Fortunately for me, I don't have to do all that now that I'm in the professional baseball sector. We have a great team of medical staff that's handling a majority of it, as well as our strength conditioning staff and sports science staff. So it's really a true like daily collaboration with the other departments on, where is this guy at? What do we need to do? And how do we get this guy back on the field pitching so that they can help out the organization as soon as possible?
Right on. Okay. How many athletes do you typically work with in one time? Like right now, what's your client load, patient load?
So we have, I'd say, about 15 guys who are actively throwing right now. And then there's plenty of guys who are kind of waiting in the wings to get back on the field and get a baseball in their hand. I think the most that I've had at one time is about 25 guys.
Ooh, 25 guys. And do you see them on a daily basis, or are you going to go like every other day and spread them out? How does your schedule work with that?
Yeah, so again, it just depends on where they're at in the process. We're in there every day, 6 days a week, and we are with them through the whole process on a daily basis. It is their job. as well as it's our job as well. So they could be throwing anywhere from 3 days a week to 6 days a week. So it really just depends on where they're at in their process and in their return to throw protocol. And then the guys who are, post-op or, waiting to throw, they're in there working out and stuff like that. So we try to touch them up and, kind of keep their mind wrapped around the fact that they are going to pick up a baseball again and throw it. So just having touch points with them during that process, making sure that they're feeling good, seeing if they need anything. Try to make myself as visible as possible with them, just because it is a hard time. Some of these guys have never been injured. They don't know how to deal with it yet, or some guys have been through it. But it's just, I think, having experienced it, I know that it was really important for me to have contact with my skill coaches throughout, whether I was throwing or not, just to kind of keep the brain wrapped around, hey, I'm going to pitch again someday.
And most of the time you spend with these throwers is in the gym setting or out by the mound, or what percentage do you spend out on the field with them compared to being in the workout room?
Yeah, so my job is pretty much solely out on the field. We do collaborate with our rehab strength coach, Garrett Cash, quite often. I do kind of pop my head in the weight room just to kind of check in on the guys, and that's kind of where I get those touch points with the guys who aren't throwing yet, and make sure that they're in good spirits and mentally they're in a good spot. So I'm in the weight room, passing through, getting those touch points, and really try to work with Garrett as much as I can, just so that we're all on the same page. And for the guys who are throwing, it's really important for me to connect with him, as well as sports science, as well as medical, just daily, just to see where everyone's at, see if I missed something on the field, see if we're getting different messages from players, or just little conversations that you have during the day that could help you out in their process.
And so do you have more of a challenge with compliance because the players want to do more than you want them to, or they're more apprehensive and they would prefer to do less than what you're asking them?
Yeah, so I think you get a little bit of both. Obviously, we're in a competitive environment, and there's some personalities that just want to go. But for the most part, I think we've seen the most success when the team collaborates and there's a plan in place. And I think that that's the biggest thing, is just educating the athlete as to, hey, here's why your program looks like this, whether it be in the weight room or on the field, or this is why your mound progression looks like this, so that they know. A lot of people will, want to push and really kind of try to get back sooner, and sometimes that leads to hiccups. But we're trying to do our best to keep each guy on that program and on that plan.
So is that a conversation that you have with the athlete? Say, hey, here's really what we need from you, and we want to get you out there as quickly as possible. Do this, or is that the mental performance coach, mental skills coach, however you label them, or is that the strength, or where does that conversation come in, and who's the one that typically kind of has it with the athlete?
I think it can depend. It can be, myself on the throwing side. We put a huge emphasis on building good relationships with our players. And if you have that relationship, you can have a little bit harder conversations, or you can really kind of say, hey, this is what we need from you, and this is why. Obviously, that trust is earned and not given right away, especially in this setting. So that's why we try to, one, collaborate and make sure that everyone's giving the same message, but also two, put the time in to build that relationship with the player who, at the end of the day, if they're hurt for the first time, could be a little bit vulnerable to new ideas or a different thought process. So we really try to build that relationship and then have those conversations. If it's a conversation about something in the weight room, somebody from that staff will have it. If it's medical, they'll have it. Sometimes it's a case where we're having trouble on all fronts. And so we sit down with the athlete and have a conversation with them and explain our side and try to hear them out as well as to, why they may want to do more, why they think they need to do more. So it's really just trying to get the full circle of information, but also being able to have conversations with objective data, as well as, the subjective data as to what we're seeing.
Okay, so take me through this, Dan. Like, you've got yourself a guy that comes in, he just had Tommy John surgery. How many weeks or months before he can start throwing again?
Yeah, so it depends on the surgeon. We have to collaborate with the surgeons based off of that. So anywhere between about, I think it's like 4.5 to 5 months, 5.5 months now. It also kind of depends on the time of year for us. When do we see this guy returning? Do we have to kind of get him going so that he has a chance to throw at the end of the season, or can we kind of hold off and give him an extra couple weeks here or there, just because the season's going to be over, and we're really just kind of focused on next spring training and getting them ready for that. So it really just depends on the time of year and where we feel the athlete's at.
Got it. Okay, so you come into play when they're ready to start throwing again, or are you there prior to that doing other stuff with the athlete? And where does your role come in the path to return to performance?
Yeah, so my actual impact is like right before the guys start throwing. So we'll start to get them moving like a baseball player again. Obviously, you're in the weight room, and as much as you can try to get sport specific in the weight room. Some guys just haven't rotated like they will when they throw a baseball, or they just don't have that feeling because they had so much time off. So I try to get in there like a week or so before and just kind of get them moving again like a pitcher, whether that be in some delivery prep stuff, just to kind of get their body and brain wrapped around moving like a pitcher again, or whether it just be, hey, here's the plan, here's what we're going to do, here's why, here's what we're thinking, what are your thoughts on this? So it's right around that my impact kind of picks up and then kind of carries them through the full return to throw program, as well as the bullpen and mound progression.
Got it. Okay, so you're with a player and now you've placed the ball in his hand. What are we looking at in terms of like pitch count? Where do you start them off? It's just like, hey, we're just going to throw 10 to 20 today, see how that feels. I don't want you going anything fast. Don't try and do any type of off speed or fastball curves or knuckle or anything else. Just want you throwing. Is that kind of how you start off and then progress to more fine tuning and increasing the volume? What's your process?
Yeah, so when a guy begins a return to throw, he's actually already done some throwing type actions, whether that be with med balls or some weighted balls. We do have a conversation with them as to how they would like to start their program. Most of the return to throw programs have some really short distances in them, whether it be like 30 feet or 45. And so we've, started to look at other ways to kind of fill those distances in with other things, whether it be these weighted balls, throwing a football, something that just kind of makes them a little bit more comfortable, because some guys don't feel comfortable at really short distances, and it creates bad patterns in their throw mechanics. So there's a couple options there. Some guys do choose to throw a baseball at really short distances, and so it's super light. We're really just looking to get the arm moving forward, and really start to build that low level of tolerance on the arm, just so that we can get them moving again and have them start to feel comfortable before they move back to higher loads and bigger distances.
So other styles of throwing and rotation, I'm thinking frisbee, darts, throwing with their non-dominant arm. Do you throw things like that out there, or am I just completely in outfield?
No, so we'll probably keep it to a football or weighted ball or baseball. Those are typically the three implements that we'll use. And in some cases, we do use, clubs and stuff like that. But those are kind of few and far between in the rehab setting just because of the weights.
Clubs, meaning like Indian clubs, or what kind of? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So some guys do throw Indian clubs into the pads just so that they can kind of feel their arm and it's a different implement. So we've had a few guys throw those. Really, at the end of the day, throwing's throwing. We just want to make sure that the pattern is in a good spot before we, start to add volume, intensity, and load on it.
And how much does sports science come into play with your position? Do you have 3D cameras out there? Are you looking at some? I mean, GPS wouldn't really do it because they're standing in one place for the most part, but how does it come into play if it does?
Yeah, we've actually been working on ways to kind of measure with our GPS stuff that we're still kind of in the works on. But sports science comes in big time. They kind of give us a really broad picture as to, where the athlete is, whether that be from force development or body weight or, just kind of overall where the athlete is physically, so that we can start to determine how we progress them or if there's stuff that we still need to work on. So Ryan Fair and I think you had Josh on the podcast a couple weeks ago. They're really impactful on how we make our decisions and how we move a guy forward. Both before the program starts and also every day in between.
Okay, now I'm gonna just shoot out this kind of wild question here. You're from Boston, but your facility is in Virginia. So I'm imagining like there's a girlfriend or wife or family involved that was from there and you moved back to the hometown there. So being out in Phoenix, am I on the right track here? Is your wife or girlfriend out there with you? Is she back in Virginia or some significant other?
Yeah, my wife and three kids are out here in Phoenix with me. They're actually currently vacationing back in Massachusetts in the Cape, which is great for them because they don't have to deal with the heat and they get to go to the beach. So yeah, we're all together down here in Phoenix, and for the time being, they're lounging on the beach while I'm out here in the desert.
Oh, nice, nice. Yeah, the perks of the job there.
Mhm.
And then, so in the off season, just to get away from the coaching for a second, how often do you spend time at your performance center? I mean, you've been doing this, you're going in your second season here with them. Is it the off season that you go back and you're working Virginia a little bit, or is this a year-round kind of thing that you're doing? How does it work for you?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I haven't had the opportunity to go back since I started. Rehab really never sleeps down here, so we get the month of December off per the new player agreement. But that's really just time to like decompress and get back to family and see them, and it gives us a little bit of time off, but really this is a 365 a year job
And how
or
many
day
hours a
job.
day? Like, do you show up at 6 a.m., don't leave till 6, or do you have some decent hours?
Yeah, that's actually one of the perks of being the rehab. We do have some decent hours. We get going a little bit earlier, and we get to get out. Obviously, having a wife and three kids, it's great to be home every night for dinner. I don't have to travel or anything like that. So it's been really rewarding to be able to do both, to be able to work with baseball players and pitchers and help their careers, and also have time to be a dad and husband and be home.
So I imagine there's, with every job and business and so on, there's always that pull to trying to focus on family at the same time. Sounds like you're doing that pretty successfully. But in your scope of practice right now, what's the most challenging thing for you as a rehab pitching coach with your players of the organization or so on? I don't want to throw anybody under the bus or anything, but just from that perspective, what do you find the most challenging?
I think the most challenging thing for me is just to kind of keep my head level. There's a lot of ups and downs in rehab with each guy. And obviously you care about each guy dearly. And you want to see them successful and have an opportunity to get back and pitch. So you kind of ride that emotional roller coaster with the guys who are struggling. And also you ride it with the guys who are having a great rehab and no real setbacks and stuff like that. So I think that's the biggest thing for me, is just kind of riding that roller coaster with all the guys, and being able to kind of turn it off. It never really shuts off as being a coach, but you try your best, and there's always something that pops up and stuff like that. So really just trying to keep a level head throughout the process with each guy, and making sure that they feel confident that they're going to get back whether or not they do.
And in regards to like growing pains, getting into your position when you began, or even now, I mean, do you have some growing pains in there, some struggles or things that you're like, I really need to know this better?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's constant. The game is evolving so quickly, and so is kind of the setting of taking care of your arms, and whether it be workload and learning about that, or trying to figure out a best process as to how to make the rehab program and protocol better. That's kind of been something that has been a little bit of a passion of mine, of how do we individualize this for each guy? How do we gather objective data to actually know where they're at, before we get them back on the mound or back in the games? So I think that the growing pains of that have been just kind of trying to figure out the best way to do that, and how do we gather the information and get strong signals as to this guy is on a good path, or this guy isn't on a good path, and how do we pivot from there? So it's really been rewarding, because we've been able to do some really cool things, with sports science and all of the data that we have now. But I think we're still trying to figure out, what makes this process, elite, and get guys back at a really high level, closer to that 100% mark.
You say it's evolving really fast. Are you speaking of technology and the advances in understanding that? Because I mean, the game's been around for over 100 years, 120, 130 years or something like that. What is it that's evolving that you have to keep up with?
Yeah, so I think like the game has evolved, even just since I was done playing in 2013. It's 10 years, and there's all types of technology. Everyone's wearing some type of monitor. We have sports science now, which we didn't have when I was playing. We have TrackMan, every pitch is recorded. There's high-speed cameras on every pitch. So it's really putting all those pieces together to really come up with the solution as to whether or not the guy's in a good spot. So there's a lot to keep up with, and now we're seeing a lot more companies come out, on the private side, with dynamometers for arm care, wearables for torque values on the elbow and stress and arm speed, and then trying to figure out workload stuff, for each guy, has really kind of pushed the game forward. But we're trying to be on the forefront of that as best we can. And it just seems like every week you turn around and something else has come out that you want to dive into, and you want to look at and see if it's actually helpful or not.
Yeah, and how much of this technology either challenges or reinforces your intuition or your instincts? Like, do you find yourself in conflicts with, hey, my head and heart are telling me one thing, and this information is telling me something else? I'm kind of at a crossroads here. Does that happen?
Yeah, I think that's really the art of coaching, right? Is like we're trying to figure out is the objective data matching up with what we're seeing on a daily basis on the field? And so, having the trust in the data is great, but you also have to trust your eye and have that intuition to be able to say, hey, like we've either got to pull back here, or hey, we can push forward here because the data may say this, but this guy's in a really good spot. And that's where building that relationship with the player, having an open line of communication and having them being honest with you, really kind of helps in those situations to say, hey, like I trust this guy, he's done everything that we've asked. We have a good relationship. He's not going to tell me one thing if he's feeling another. And so that's kind of where everything comes into play, and really just trying to build that skill as best we can.
Okay, we gain experience, like you were saying earlier, with the COVID coming out and opening up facility. We gain a lot of experience, and we can see some of the bright lining on those dark clouds. So when it comes to your experience thus far, are there any kind of situations where you really learn from? I won't call them mistakes necessarily, but things where you're like, I'm not going to do that again. Learning opportunities. Have one that percolates up to the surface for you? Any particular one?
I don't think that there's one in particular. I think it's the things that kind of happen that are freak, that kind of get you to, think about things a little bit differently and make sure that you're checking all your boxes on a daily basis. Obviously we're really concerned about the arm and the arm health. And sometimes something pops up with a lower extremity. And so it's just, making sure that you're connecting with your people and you're going over all the data as much as you can. And, obviously it's sports, stuff happens. Whether a guy didn't sleep well the night before, bullpen or something like that, you just really just kind of kicks you back into that high gear of awareness and kind of watching things a little bit closer. But there's not necessarily like one thing that's popped up that kind of percolates to the top of like a learning moment. I think it's just the small reminders of what the job entails and how you need to go about your preparation on the front end of everything. And also, back to trusting that coach's eye as to what you're seeing.
And what about success story? Like, I imagine you follow several of the athletes after release from Care for You and back on the mound, but are there any in particular that you're like, that's why I do what I do?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of them are. Anytime you get a guy back to being able to chase their dream down, it means a lot to them. I don't know if they know how much it means to me. And again, it's like riding that emotional roller coaster of the ups and downs and setbacks and, all the successes. For me, anytime we get a guy out, it's exciting. And it's really rewarding because of the fact that I was in their shoes at one point. I was there. I successfully got out of rehab and back into games and stuff like that. And I know what that feels like. So, really the big days for me are, when they throw their first bullpen or, their first day on the line playing catch. Like we try to celebrate all of those small little victories because we know that, it is a long process and these guys have put a lot of work into getting healthy and getting back to, their goal and their dream of playing professional baseball. And so, every little victory to me is huge. And, they're even bigger when we get, to tell a guy that he's hopping on a flight and going out to an affiliate, or, that he's done with rehab with us and he's shifting over to one of the teams.
So I know, Dan, that with like strength coaches in the league and athletic trainers, they have kind of their own organization or association, and they can network with one another. They have like annual conferences and so on. Same thing for the pitching rehab coach, or do you connect or coordinate with other guys that have the same title as you on other organizations?
Yeah, try to connect with them, online and at conferences and stuff like that. And I think, the role of rehab pitching coach, I don't know if it's necessarily the most desired by guys. They obviously want to, coach an affiliate and get out to the big leagues at some point. But I think, the community of rehab pitching coaches and even in the private sector, a lot of guys are sharing information as best they can and trying to figure out the process to help their guys get better. And so, it is kind of a smaller community, but I think there's some guys doing some really great things in the industry, and both in the professional side of things and also in the private sector.
Cool. Okay, so when it comes to enhancing your career, your knowledge base, and so on, where do you set your sights in regards to like more learning, more education? Is it um, communication classes, sports psychology, biomechanics, um, where at pitchers conferences? Where do you go?
Yeah, so I think it's a combination of everything, right? Like this, being a pitching coach now is not just about the um, mechanical side of things and pitch design and gaining velocity and stuff like that. I think again the game has shifted to where you kind of have to have a little bit of knowledge on each piece of the puzzle, so that you can truly understand what's going into affecting performance and ball flight and all that. So for me, I try to at least pick 1 to 2 courses a year, something that interests me or something that I feel like I have a hole in. So over the past couple of years, I've taken a course on workload, taken a course on just human movement. So it's really just trying to fill in as many buckets as you can along the way. And like I said earlier, the game is evolving very rapidly, so you kind of always feel like you're a little bit behind, and you're just trying to do your best to catch up.
Right on. So I guess this will be my last question. If you had, with the listening audience, we've got some young professionals that are aspiring to go into professional sports and check it out. What kind of advice would you give to the young men and women who are maybe looking to follow your career path or be on a support team like the one you're on?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was really going outside of the normal kind of certifications and classes and stuff like that, and really trying to understand human movement first, and then being able to tie everything back to pitching. That was the biggest thing for me, is like, how do you get a guy to move really well so that they can stay healthy and get as many opportunities to go out and pitch and play as they can. So diving into some of the stuff that may not be as accredited or stuff like that, I think you can take a little bit of knowledge from everybody and then form it into your own personal kind of program or process. So I mean, there's so much information out there. Really just continuing to be a student on human movement and pitching and sports science and all that. You kind of have to be able to get a little bit of knowledge on everything so that you can have those conversations and start to put the pieces together for yourself.
Right on. Well said. And if people want to follow you, I know LinkedIn, do you have an Instagram handle or anything like that?
Yeah, the business is Player Development Lab on Instagram. My personal is D Mahoney 33 on Instagram. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Like, I feel like I'm in a position to try to give back as much as I can to the game and to people, because I know that I had a lot of people along the way that did that for me. So I'm happy to chat on anything and really just try to help the community out so that we can figure everything out and keep guys healthy and on the field.
Right on, Dan. Thanks so much for this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for this episode of the Zealous Podcast. I want to thank the Cleveland Guardians organization and, of course, Dan for coming on. And he gave me some great insight, really good information. Hope you enjoyed it as well. Remember, hit the subscribe button. Come on, join the ranks here and follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder. While you're at it, remember, SatantaCollege.com for your master's program of science. Just put in RS10. You get 10% off your tuition, and it's a great educational process. And while you're at it, hit the button for the vote your ballot kind of on the NSCA board of directors and a couple other things. In fact, maybe meet me at Baltimore for the national conference coming up on July 10th to the 13th. We'll see you there.